This caught my eye one evening. I really liked the highlights on the fruit and the general composition, and so I wanted to do a quick sketch using this recycled packaging paper sketchbook that I've made up and trying out some gouache to capture some of the highlights on this nice tinted paper. So I started with the ink pen just to try and get the general outlines and composition. And I wasn't too worried about being too accurate here. Just wanted to get the main features of the whole thing. And for this kind of thing, if you're not 100% confident in the accuracy of your drawing skills, you can still get a lot of valuable practice, but just try to simplifying the shapes. I'll try and demonstrate this in a future video where I'll go through this kind of exercise again. So I'm just trying to catch the main points here, and then I'm going to add the highlights using the gouache and the water brush, and then I'll add some color to the whole thing. It was easiest just to use the paint straight from the tube, and that saves messing around with any extra little pots. And that's quite a useful tip if I was doing this outside or in a cafe or somewhere, then it just reduces the amount of stuff I've got to mess around with. I used the paint quite thickly and quite carefully to try and get the main highlights that I was interested in, which was especially this one along the top back edge of that banana. And on the inside of the bananas as well, on one of the inside facets, where it was facing the rest of the bunch, there was a really nice soft reflected light, which I wanted to try to catch to some degree in this sketch. Trying to catch the main highlights like this is a very useful observation exercise, and so it's where using this kind of tinted paper is really nice as a way of practicing, because you can concentrate on both the highlights and the main shadows, and both of them show up really well on it. And then it leaves you with the mid-tone of the paper, which you can play with then, whether you add colors or decide not to. I was using these Derwent Inktense pencils, and I just wanted to pick a bit of color off the end of the pencil there with the water brush to put onto the bananas and try and just tint the highlights a wee bit. After that, I added the dry color. I didn't have an actual matching orange for the oranges, so I was going to try and build it up using the yellow and a wee bit of red. And you can see later on whether that was successful. I'm working pretty freely, and I'm not too worried about being too accurate with the colors. It's quite hard to do when you've only got a few. I was using mainly a red, a green, and a really nice warm reddish brown called Madder Brown, which I've only bought recently, and it actually makes a really nice reddish brown color once you add a water wash over it. It'll actually be a nice color for sketching as well, to give a nice warm tone to a sketch. I decided to use it in some of the shadows as well, just to add a warmer tone to them. And later on I used a bit of sepia as well, just to get the darker, slightly more neutral tones. Although it looks reasonably bright on camera, the light was actually getting very poor at this point. So I was reaching the point of having to finish quickly, and then I could turn the lights on for doing the actual water washes to bring out the strength of the colors. I was quite pleased overall with the basic dry sketch, and I'd caught the main points of what had caught my eye at the very beginning. One thing I've learned with using a water brush and these kinds of colours is when I start putting the wash onto these Inktense pencils, to start with the lightest colours, and then if there's any contamination of the colour in the brush itself, despite trying to wash it out, then it has a bit less impact on the darker colours. Of course I said that, and then at the time a bit of the sepia from the shadows managed to get into the apple colours, so that kind of spoiled the effect a little bit. But there you go. This is what happens when you're doing a quick sketch. I was hoping the oranges would come out more of an orange colour, but again, they came out a bit darker and miraculously turned from oranges into apples. So whether you'd call that a happy accident or not, I guess depends on your taste in fruit. A thing I did notice was where the wash went over some of the highlight bits, they stood out a little bit strangely, but once the water had dried out of the paper, it actually settled down fine. So I just wanted to add a few little finishing touches to shadows and a few little bits here and there. I would have had the option to add a brighter orange watercolor wash from a set of watercolors over the oranges, but I had other things to get on with that evening and I was happy just to leave it be. But you do still have some options if you want to amend things, although how successful it would be, I'm not quite sure. So I was pretty pleased with the basic sketch overall. I did decide though afterwards to add a bit of a darker background just to make some of the fruits stand out a bit more. And I used a combination of sepia and this madder brown to make a nice sort of warm but dark background shadow. Because I wanted to preserve that clean edge around the banana, then I just turned the whole thing upside down to make it physically easier to paint around it neatly. I could have used a bigger watercolor brush, I guess, but that would have meant going upstairs to get stuff, and I had too much else to get on with. The water brush was to hand, and I just thought, well, let's get on with it and live with however it looks. One of the really important things, I think, and I think it's useful to bear in mind with some of these sketches, especially if you're a bit of a perfectionist, is that even if it doesn't work out on paper, the fact that you've observed it, that you've seen it and noticed whatever it is you're trying to capture, means that even an unsuccessful sketch can still act as a useful reference point for later to remind you of what you were looking at. So I like to think that observation, even if it didn't succeed, you noticed it, and that's a useful, positive outcome for this bit of practice. If you've enjoyed watching this, if you've found some value from it, it would be great if you'd give it a thumbs up. If you want to support the channel a bit more, there's a link to buy me a coffee down in the description. Put any questions or comments that you've got in the comments below. Hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope to see you again soon.